Hi, hello, welcome back to part 3 of reading Borrasca. If you haven't seen the first, 3 parts of the series, go check it out. I have a whole playlist now, where you can see part 1 and part 1.2, because I broke those up in 2 pieces because I was sick, and I don't think you guys want to hear a whole hour of me sniffling. But I did part 2 all the way through. That's like a 55-minute video, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do. But this would be like too long to read. So piggybacking off of part 2, so a time skip happened. Sam, Kyle, Kimber are all older, all that stuff. Like, they're living their youth, and Sam slowly figures out that something has been covered up within Driskin. And he learned some stuff about his boss Mira and the Prescotts about the Dratskys, if I believe. Sorry, it's been like a little while since I read, or since I've read part 2. But Sam figures out that something weird is going on. He learns from his boss's husband, that she is a part of she's part of a family that three of the sons died in a horrendous mining incident. Like, they died in the mines, and then they disappeared. So they went to go figure out, hey, what's going on, and they wanted to find more answers. So they sought out the Prescott family, and that's when they hear the news from Kimber's mom that she unfortunately took her own life. My TLDR did not do it justice, but please check out part 2 if you haven't seen it yet. But that's too long to read if you're just popping into Borrasca like right now. Okay, so outside of that, let's get into reading. So I don't know how long this video is going to be, probably like close to an hour. So yeah, let's get into it. So, Borrasca, part 3. Do you think she blames herself? I don't know, man, probably. I stretched out on the reclined seat of my Chevy and pulled the bill of my hat lower over my eyes. But do you think she's okay? I didn't answer him. I certainly hadn't been okay when Whitney died, and Kimber was even closer to her mom than I was to my sister. She was definitely not okay. Sam, seriously, I'm fucking freaking out here. It's been 2 days. I pushed my hat off my face and looked over at Kyle, who was admittedly a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, his face sallow, and his red hair was greasy. Dude, her mom committed suicide. You know how close Kimber was to her mom. She just needs some time, but she'll be okay. She hasn't answered any of my calls or texts. I left her like 9 voicemails, man. I think I'm going crazy. You just have to give her space. Yeah, but she's my... He still couldn't say it around me. I'm supposed to be looking after her. I sat up and pulled the chair up right behind me. Look, Kyle, I know you want to help Kimber, and I want to help Kimber too. But she hasn't answered our calls, or been to school, or come to the door when we stop by her house. She doesn't want to see us right now, and we have to be okay with that. Right now, Kimber knows what's best for Kimber. What about the note? You think that has something to do with it? I sighed. You don't even know if there was a note. Kimber's dad was upset and messed up when he said that it's possible. I misheard him anyway. I asked my dad about it, and he said that there's no letter. Right, because your dad's such a beacon of truth. One look at Kyle told me he immediately regretted his words. I shrugged. I don't know what to believe anymore. The truth was that I knew what I heard. Mr. DeStaro had said something to the cops about a letter, but I couldn't tell Kyle that. Not right now. He was already worried about that his relationship with Kimber was part of the reason her mom had been so depressed. I asked my dad about the letter when he come home after that long night, and he sighed. He ran both his hands through his hair in a tired way, and said, "Sam, I don't know what to tell you." And DeStaro did not leave a suicide note, and the first time I ever heard of it. With our best friend in mourning and our investigation on hold, Kyle and I had been existing in a sort of suspended state. We went to school intermittently, skipping classes here and there, missing end-of-year tests and smoking more weed than either of us could afford. Without Kimber there to set us straight and keep us in line, we were lethargic, brooding, and irresponsible. I never realized how much I relied on her. Kyle and I skipped the last 2 periods of the day and debated on whether we should even go to school tomorrow, which was the last day of our sophomore year. We finally decided to show up for the second period, which I was glad we did because Kimber showed up in biology. I didn't even see her at first. I had my head down on my desk, resting on folded arms when I felt a meek hand pat my shoulder. I turned around to see her standing there, looking unsure and uncomfortable. I gave her a half smile and pulled her into a hug, but it wasn't a super comforting, not at all awkward Kimber hug. It was weaker hug, and I felt so protective in it, and that I was sad when it was over. "How are you doing, Kay?" I asked her when she finally released me. Kimber wiped a tear off her cheek. I'm okay." And she gave me a wobbly smile, and I knew it wasn't true. I wrapped her into another quick hug as Phoebe Dranger gave us a snotty look. "Have you seen Kyle yet?" "No, I have next period with him. He's been worried about you." I know," she said, sliding her eyes to the floor. "Things have been really hard for me at home." "It's okay," I said. "We're here for you whatever you need." "Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Whatever you need." Since it was the last day of school, our teacher, Mr. Founder, was just happy to return our graded test and was bullshit the rest of the period. Kimber talked about the arrangements for the funeral that weekend and chided Kyle and I for skipping finals to get stoned. When the bell rang, I could see that Kimber was both excited and nervous to see Kyle. As we packed our bags, I assured her that Kyle wasn't mad. He was just worried about her. She threw the bag over her shoulder, set her jaw, and nodded. She was trying so hard to keep it together. As soon as Kyle saw her from down the hall, he slammed his locker shut and walked towards us with such intensity that I began to wonder if maybe he was mad. He pushed past a dozen people without so much as glancing at them, and left a curious if annoyed crowd in his wake. When he finally reached us, Kyle threw his backpack against the wall and swooped up Kimber in the sort of way you see in old and black and white movies. Everyone who watched this all unfold, including me, groaned in unison. Since most of the teachers weren't even bothering to take attendance that day, I went to calculus with Kimber and Kyle, where they had the same conversation Kimber and I had in the last period. Towards the end of the hour, the conversation faltered and became uneasy. Kyle and I exchanged a look over the top of Kimber's head, and I nodded at him. Kimber, he said quietly, did your did your mom leave a letter? What? Kimber asked in surprise. I heard your dad talking about a letter that day. On Tuesday, I said. Oh. As we waited for her to continue, the bell rang for lunch. Everyone followed out of the room, but the three of us stayed, still sitting on our desk. Kimber, I finally said. She sighed, sadly, and looked over at Kyle. Yes. What did it say? He asked nervously. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I asked my dad for it when we got home, and he said I misheard him, and there wasn't a letter. He said not to mention it to anyone, or else I'd just upset people. Well, then we both misheard him, I said, which seems unlikely. I've known my dad all my life, and I know when he's lying. People started to filter in for the next period, sliding sympathetic glances at Kimber. Since it was our lunch period, we gathered up our things and walked out to my car, as we always did. I sat in the back seat, letting Kyle and Kimber take the front. Kimber took a deep breath and continued. I know my dad is lying, and I know he has the letter. Are you sure? Kyle asked. I could tell he was still terrified that some of the blame rested on him. Yeah, and I know it contains the name Prescott. I think I even know where it is. Prescott? Yet somehow I wasn't surprised. He was the axis around which everything that was bad orbited. How do you know that it said Prescott? Kyle asked. I heard my dad reading it once. I think he reads it a lot, actually. He was sort of sobbing and whispering the words and throwing things in his office. My dad, he hasn't been well. Do you think she was having an affair with Jimmy Prescott? I shook my head. I'm guessing you need to think bigger than that, Kyle. I agree, Kimber said, to her hands in her lap. With everything we know about the Prescotts, I'm fairly sure that this isn't about an affair. It's all connected somehow, don't you think? My dad was the love of my mom's life, but she only left a letter for me. I think that somehow I'm the one she wronged, not him, you know? I think she did something to me, or maybe she did it because of me. Kimber's voice broke over the last sentence, and Kyle pulled her over, kissed the top of her head, and whispered words to her that I couldn't hear. So we need to get the letter, I said, after giving them a minute. Yes, I really need to read it. Kimber's voice was still wobbly. How do we get it? I asked. If it's in the office, we just need to wait until her dad isn't home, Kyle said as he looked out the window. You don't think I thought of that? Kimber sighed. He never leaves his office, not since we got home from the hospital. He sleeps in there. So we need to get him out. No, we need to get me in. Tomorrow is my mom's funeral, and half of Drisking will be there, including my dad, of course. I need to leave without him noticing and run home so I can go through the office. Okay, that's easy, I said. Without my dad noticing, and I need to get back by the end of the service. We both nodded, but stayed silent, because it looked like Kimber was weighing, saying more. My dad, he's been very cold, and I think he blames me. Kimber finally said. That's bullshit, Kyle spat. Can you guys help me? Absolutely. Of course. We spent the rest of the lunch hour creating a plan for far more strategic than the mission probably needed. Kyle and I would engage Mr. DeStaro in conversation, and then Kyle would get a text from Kimber telling him she was having a breakdown in the bathroom. Kyle would leave to go comfort her, and they would take my car to the DeStaro house. I will stay behind and keep an eye on Kimber's dad while they're gone. I went to work that afternoon for the first time since Monday. Mira seemed to be in a much better mood, and let me go home early since it was a Friday. I didn't sleep well though, and I got up at 4 a.m. to go through my clothes looking for something dressy and black to wear to the funeral. My dad came in before he left for work and found his disheveled, panicked teenage son looking helplessly through piles of black clothing. He smiled pityingly and led me to his own closet. Since my dad and I not only the same face but the same build as well, finding something suitable to wear was easy. I thanked him, and he asked me to apologize to Kimber for having to work through the service, and that he sends his love. Anne DeStaro's funeral was at the Episcopalian Church on the other side of town. I picked up Kyle at 9 and saw he was also wearing a suit of his dad's, though it didn't fit nearly as well, as he was constantly pulling up the sleeves and readjusting the waistline. Unfortunately, for Kyle, he was much smaller than his dad. We parked as far away from the church as possible, where we hoped that no one would notice a car leaving. When we went inside the church, we saw that Kimber wouldn't have to do much acting to convince people that she was having a breakdown. We found her at the back of the room, tucked into a chair and a puddle of curly orange hair and tears. Cal sat down next to her and pulled her into a hug. Jesus, Kimber, what's wrong? I kicked his foot and shot him a look that said, really? Cal bit his lip. Fuck. There's no one here, Kimber whispered against his chest. My mom grew up here. She had hundreds of friends in this town, and no one came. We looked around, and I had to admit, the turnout was sparse. A few groups of 3 or 4 people standing together. Kimber's dad, who sat in a chair opposite the room of his daughter, with his head in his hands, and some family I recognized from barbecues at Kimber's house. Ex-Sheriff Clary with his wife, Grace, was there, standing with a few of my dad's deputies and talking quietly in the corner. I could see why Kimber was upset. As we waited for the service to start, I realized I'd never been to a funeral before. I wished that we had one for my sister, but I knew we never could since Whitney was still legally alive. It made me sad to think that she would never be laid to rest. Only a few other funeral goers trickled in, and the pastor began getting people seated for the service. I noticed the casket and the pulpit for the first time. I was glad to see it was still closed. Still, I had to wonder at the simple, unadorned, almost ugly coffin that has been chosen for Kimber's mom. I knew that the Staros had money, quite a lot of it, actually. It was interesting, almost insulting choice. Poor Kimber. Kyle and I stood Kimber up and started over to the pews, but she stopped abruptly. I'm ready, she said, and brushed the hair away from her wet face. Ready for? To leave. I can't be in here anymore. It's a disgrace to my mother. Kimber raised her head a notch and set her jaw. I knew this look, and it meant that there would be no reasoning with her. Cal and I looked at each other. This wasn't the plan. It'd be a lot more obvious if Kimber was missing from the service, especially with a low turnout. You guys go over and say what we've rehearsed with to my dad. Kyle, I will text you in 30 seconds. Go. Kyle nodded and started over, and I knew we weren't arguing. Mr. DeStaro was finally standing, looking over at the front pew reserved for him and his daughter with hesitation. Mr. DeStaro, I said as we approached. I'm very sorry to hear about your wife. She was... Shit, I forgot my lines. A great woman who raised a wonderful daughter, Kyle finished. Yeah, he spat. Do great women commit suicide, leaving their wonderful daughters alone in the world? Shit. Do great women jump off of buildings and make spectacles of themselves, and leave their families to deal with the publicity and the grief? Kyle's phone chirped. Thank God. Oh, that's Kimber, Kyle said a little too fast, before he actually had time to look at his phone. Oh man, she isn't well. Says she's crying and feeling sick. I'm gonna go help her. No! Mr. DeStaro yelled, so suddenly that Kyle dropped his phone on the ground where it made a loud clatter on the stone floors. Not you. You don't help my daughter. You don't even talk to her. He can go. And he pointed at me. Okay. I stuttered. The plan had changed too much. I needed to somehow get the car keys from Kyle without being seen. Kyle gave me a shaky, subtle nod, and then he and Mr. DeStaro went to sit down. It was obvious Kimber's dad was keeping an eye on Kyle. Getting the car keys from him was going to be nearly impossible. I backed into the shadows at the back of the room while the pastor started the service. I texted Kyle 4 times asking for help, but he wouldn't dare touch his phone. He just stared straight ahead, flicking worried glances at Mr. DeStaro every few seconds. After several minutes, I went to find Kimber to see what she wanted to do, but she wasn't in our meeting spot by the back door. The plan was falling apart. I pulled out my phone as I heard a text. Me. Where are you? Me. Kyle is next to your dad. I can't get the keys from him. I waited in the hallway, tapping my phone against my hand nervously. After a minute or two, my phone vibrated. Kimber. I'm sorry I've left without you guys. I had to get out of there. I'm so sorry. I'll be back before the end of the service. I promise. Shit. Me. Be safe. It was now imperative that I not be seen. I went to the men's bathroom, locked myself in the stall, and played Snake for the longest 20 minutes of my life. I knew the service wouldn't go much longer, so I texted Kimber again. Me. You on your way back yet? Did you find it? I sat waiting, watching the minutes tick by. I texted her again. Me. I think the service is ending soon. Where are you? After another 7 minutes of no response, I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. I was getting nervous. I was about to try a third time when 2 people walked into the bathroom, and my phone vibrated with a text. It was Kyle. The service was over. Kyle. Kimber has the keys. Why aren't you guys back yet? Did you find anything? I left the bathroom without washing my hands and received dirty looks from the two strangers I left the bathroom without washing my hands and received dirty looks from two strangers at the urinals as the door closed behind me. I found Kyle staring at the window looking for my car. Kyle! He jumped. Where's Kimber? What'd you guys find? I don't know. She left without me. What the fuck? Why? Where is she? I don't know, Kyle. She left without me. I reiterated. She's not answering any of my calls or texts. Fuck, mine either. We have to keep an eye on her dad until she gets back. We're not the only ones, Kyle said, gesturing across the room. What the fuck is going on? 3 men were talking to Kimber's dad in the corner across the room. Chief among them was Killian Clary, who was flanked by his 2 former deputies. Driskin's retired sheriff had his hand on Mr. DeStaro's arm. I was speaking to him in an angry, hushed tone. Kimber's dad was shaking his head and desperately objecting to something. The 2 deputies walked out the front door at the front door of the church, and Mr. DeStaro sagged against Killian Clary, who sat him into a nearby chair. Something was happening. Call Kimber now, Kyle said. I tried again, and this time, the call rang twice and was sent to voicemail. I ended the call and threw up my hands, looking desperately at Kyle. Again, he said, and he took out his own phone. I got the same result, but felt a jolt of relief when someone answered Kyle's call, but it wasn't Kimber. Phil, what part of town are you in? I need a ride. It's an emergency. I waited. Yeah, man, I'm at the Northridge Church. As fast as you can. I'm with Sam. I'll owe you. Kyle hung up and then immediately tried Kimber's phone. She's sending me to voicemail too. We both stood at the window, anxiously waiting to see Phil's silver Mazda pull up. Kyle chewed his lip, and I tapped my phone. Come on, Saunders. We threw occasional looks back at Kimber's dad until Clary stood him up, and ushered the now inconsolable man out of the church. Suddenly, Kyle's phone chirped. We both looked down to see Kimber's name flash up on the screen. Kyle's knees nearly buckled in relief, and he sagged against the wall. Kimber. I found it. Kyle opened the text and furiously typed a reply. Kyle, they're coming for you, Kay. We both stared at the phone, waiting for a response. And just as the sun blinded us, as it reflected off of Phil's approaching silver sedan, we got one. Kimber. They're here. It was the last message we got from Kimber. When Phil dropped us at the DeStaro house, we found the front door unlocked with no one home. My car was sitting in a driveway, unlocked with the keys in the ignition. Kyle and I drove back to the church, but the funeral was over, and a few people that had attended it were already gone. We drove back to Kimber's house again, but it was just as we left it, and no one was home. Kyle had lost it by this time. I was an absolute wreck. He called her so many times. I was sure he killed her battery. His calls went straight to voicemail, and his texts were unanswered. After a half an hour of begging from Kyle, I finally called my dad. He answered immediately. Sammy, what's wrong? It's Kimber. She's gone. Dad, we looked everywhere, but her and her dad are missing. She left the funeral early, and Killian Clary was talking to her dad, and then Samson and Greg left, and I think they went to her house and they got her. Dad, I think they're still working for Clary on the side or something. I think they're doing something bad. Whoa, 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 slow down. Sammy, come by the station and let's talk. I'll take a statement from you boys and I'll send a couple officers over to investigate the house right now. Just calm down, Sam. We'll handle this. I hung up and threw my car violently into reverse, jerking the wheel to the left as I hit the end of the driveway. Sam, how how do we know that we can trust the cops? I'm not trusting the cops, I'm trusting my dad. I said, my words sounded hopeless, even to me. I turned into the sheriff's office, and Kyle was out of the car as soon as I slowed down enough to park. By the time I got inside, my dad had Kyle by the shoulders and was nodding solemnly at everything Kyle was telling him. When my dad saw me, he motioned for an officer to take us to his office. After a few minutes, he came in and sat down across the desk from us. Alright, boys, I'm going to have Officer Ramirez come in a few minutes to take a statement from you both. I want you to know that at this point in time, it looks like the Staros left town voluntarily. No, no way, Mr. Walker. Kimber would never. My dad held up his hand for silence. Let me rephrase. Jacob the Staro left town voluntarily. Kimber is a minor and has no legal rights here. If her dad said they're leaving, then they're leaving. But she's not answering her phone, and we went to that house, Dad. Nothing was packed. Maybe they're just getting away for a while. Maybe going to relatives. I can't theorize as to why she wouldn't answer her phone, other than maybe she just wants to be left alone for a while. Kyle was exasperated, but look, I know it's hard for you to understand, but losing a family member takes a toll on a person. Sam, you know that. We don't know how people are going to grieve, and we don't have a right to. I think it's very likely that Kimber will be back by fall for school. The fall? Sheriff Walker, that's 2 months away. You need to investigate now. Kyle, I know you're upset, and no one said that we're not going to investigate thoroughly. Like you investigated Whitney's disappearance thoroughly? I spat, and I didn't regret the words. Sam, he snapped, with more force than I ever heard him use. I am tired of listening to you insulate that I didn't do everything I could to find Whitney. I love your sister more than you can imagine. She's my daughter, Sammy, and I will never give up. And what about the deputies I left the funeral to go after her? Kyle interrupted. My dad raised an eyebrow at me. Samson and Greg, I ground out through clenched teeth. He sighed. Boys, Samson and Greg left the funeral because I sent them out on a call. I stood up violently, knocking over my chair in the process. Oh, come on, Dad. Alright, that's enough. The sheriff slammed his hands on the desk and stood up. I told you I would tell you what I know, and I have. I understand your friend is important to you, and god damn it, the Staros are friends of mine too. I promise you that I will use my full extent of my resources to track them down and put your minds at ease. But until then, all I can offer you is the assurance that there is no sign of foul play at this time. You boys need to get off your warpath and let us handle this. Now, Ramirez is waiting in the hall to take your statements, and the both of you are going to go home. Understood? I said nothing and glared at my dad, seething with rage. Kyle stood up and walked out of the room with no emotion whatsoever. He walked past Ramirez, and I followed him out to the car. We got in, and I waited for Kyle to say something. I heard a loud sniffle and looked over at him to see his face slick with tears. It was the first time I ever seen Kyle, but not the last. I think, okay, well, I'm gonna butt in right here. I think this one's supposed to mean it was the first time I ever seen Kyle like that, but it's not the last. I think that's what they meant, but I don't know. So, move on with the story. He's lying, he whispered. I just shook my head. I didn't know what to believe. Kyle turned his face away from me. I know he's lying. Something bad has happened, and he's lying about it. What happened? I heard more sniffling as Kyle tried to collect himself. Dude, fucking talk to me. What do you think happened? Kimber's gone, like all the others. She's at the place where bad things happen. I punched the steering wheel. How the fuck has this happened? Not Kimber. Please, not Kimber. Was all this because of me? Had her mother killed herself because of something I'd done? Something we found out? Was Kimber taken because of me? If I thought for 1 minute that that was true, I knew I would have cracked into tiny pieces. No, not Kimber, no. Yes, Sam, fucking think about it, Kyle yelled at me. It's the treehouse, it's all the same. Borrasca, the skin man, the triple tree. Your sister, the mountain, is all the fucking same. It's the Prescott's empire, and now Kimber has been fucking consumed by it. Where do we go? I could feel the warm tears of my own desperation and hopelessness sliding down my cheeks. What do we do? What do we fucking do? Kyle threw his hands up in frustration. We have to go to Ambercott, right? It all starts and ends at the triple tree, Sam. Surely you figured this out. We've been to the treehouse a million times, Kyle. There's nothing there. I don't know where the fuck else to go, Sam. As soon there was a thud on the window. I jumped as someone tapped on the window of the car and wiped my tears off my face. I rolled down the window to see Officer Grigg laying down and looking into the car. You boys move along home, alright? Yep, I said, and turned the key to the ignition. Officer Grigg waved at us as we pulled out of the parking lot, but we didn't wave back. The treehouse, Kyle said. We drove in silence, both of us trying desperately to get a hold of ourselves. If we were going to be any help to Kimber, we need to be calm enough to think logically. I parked in a space next to the trailhead and saw several bikes tied to a post. We made our way up to the rest rim. As we made our way up to the rest rim, Prescott Ore Trail, we passed Parker and a couple of his friends coming down it. I nodded to him, and Kyle said nothing. I just stared at the trail, reaching for the only place he knew to go. It was almost dark by the time we got to Ambercott, and there was a little light left to search for whatever Kyle hoped to find. It took half an hour in the darkness before I finally convinced Kyle that there was nothing there to help Kimber. And though we didn't speak of it, I knew that he and I were both painfully aware of all the sounds that night. We were scared, terrified down to our very bones, that we would hear the piercing, scraping, grinding, and metal screams of the monster at Borrasca that we become so accustomed to over the years. We both dreaded it, prayed that it will not come, and we did not speak of it. I dropped off Kyle at home, and promised we will find Kimber tomorrow. I swore we would. He gave me nothing more than a shallow nod, and disappeared inside his house. My dad was waiting for me in the kitchen when I got home a few minutes later. I didn't look at him. I walked over to the fridge, realizing that I hadn't eaten all day. Sammy, sit down. I want to apologize for today. I took out some chicken and cheese and went to the pantry for the bread. I I know you're scared, and I know that a lot has been going on that you can't exactly relate to. He sighed, and had been depressed for a good long while. Sam, over 20 years. That fell away on a person. I ignored him. I continued making my sandwich. I was dying inside, wondering if I could even trust the man I call my dad my entire life. She was suffering, Sam, and sometimes people who suffer that deeply don't know any other way out. She knew her depression was hurting her, her husband, and her daughter, and maybe she mistakenly thought she was doing them a favor. Mom's depressed, I said, without taking my eyes from my task. He sighed. Your mother is coping, okay? And this was very different, Sam. Kimber's mom had been depressed since she was in her 20s, early in her marriage, and suffered multiple miscarriages, infertility. And infertility can be very hard on some couples, and not even Kimber's birth could totally ease her pain. Dad, with all due respect, I'm tired and I'm going to bed. Kyle and I are getting up early to look for Kimber. I threw the knife into the sink with a loud clang and turned to look at my dad for the first time. Please tell me you're still trying to find Kimber. The sheriff stood up from the kitchen table, looking as tired and disheveled as I felt. I promised Sammy. And I finally believed him. The next morning, when I pulled up to Kyle's house, Parker came out to meet me. Hey Parker, I said when I rolled down the window, and the cool morning air wafted. Kyle's not here. He left around 5. He stole my dad's truck. He's pissed, so you better go. Thanks, man, I said, and then rolled up the window and took off down the street. I drove around all morning looking for Kyle and calling his cell, but he didn't pick up until around noon. Sorry, man, I couldn't sleep. Kyle sounded a bit more stable than yesterday. That's cool. Where you at? I don't know exactly. A rare spot where I'm getting service. Are you in the woods? Yeah. She's out here, Sam. Somewhere in these mountains. I can feel it. I know it. Alright, well, let me meet you. Okay, just come down to the Rest Rim Trail, and I'll meet you there. I was only 5 minutes away, so I arrived before Kyle had time to get down the mountain. Mr. Londy's red Dodge Ram was parked haphazardly in a no parking zone, and I figured it will probably be towed by the time he got back. I doubted Kyle cared at this point, though. I crossed my arms and leaned against my car as I waited for him, staring up the dirty red trail in impatience. When Kyle finally showed up half an hour later, he was covered in sweat and dirt and ejection. So, I said, pushing up off the car. No, nothing, man. Alright, well, let's keep searching. We hiked miles and miles of the mountain that day, but we didn't find any sign of human life. And for the next few days, the sun was out, so were we. Kyle was growing more and more desperate, crossing onto private property to look for logging equipment and mapping out the country's many mines to search. Mapping out the county's many, many mines to search the abandoned buildings. But the mountain was big, and the needle buried too deep into the haystack. As the days slipped away, so did Kyle's sanity. Every time I saw my dad, he would give me a sober look and promise me that they were still looking. It seemed to me that even he was growing concerned, that the Starro house remained as cold and empty as the space between the stars above it. On the 11th night of our Kimberless existence, I was awoken out of a troubled sleep by the piercing, whirling, screeching sound of death at Borrasca. I cried myself back to sleep to the torturous sounds of Kyle's own agony next door. We had felled her. Kimber was dead. Okay, so that was Borrasca Part 3. So, hopefully you all enjoyed that. Also, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video, but this was all a one take, by the way. So, I was talking for like 45 minutes straight, so, you know. Yeah, I forgot to mention that though. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed Part 3. Part 4, I'll be recording Part 4 tomorrow. That'll probably be up by Thursday, if anything. But yeah, Part 4 will be the trigger warning one, because Part 4 of Borrasca gets really fucking crazy, and, you know, I don't want to subject people to that, so there will be a trigger warning. I don't know how to necessarily explain it, you know, without giving spoilers, because I know what it is, so yeah. Oh, and my dog's making an appearance. Hold on. Okay, my dog's just hearing the neighbors and she's freaking out. But yeah, so that's my 20-pound chihuahua named Lucy. She's making an appearance in this video. But yeah. So, as I was talking about, Borrasca Part 4, I'll be recording it tomorrow. Yet again, I'm going to try to find how to say what the trigger warning is. I'll probably just put like, this is just like basic warning. But yeah. So, Kimber is gone. Unfortunately, and Kyle's taking the brunt of it, and also I feel really bad for Kyle. But yeah, so we'll see how it ends tomorrow on my stream, and you guys will see how it ends on like Thursday or Tuesday. No, yeah, Thursday. So yeah. So all my links are down below if you want to follow me there. I have Instagram, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, alt Twitter, all that stuff. And also, please consider subscribing. I do a lot of scary stuff, scary story videos, and all that stuff. So if you want to see more, feel free to hit the subscribe button. It helps me out. Trying to get to 500 subscribers. That's probably gonna be my goal for 2024. But yeah. Also, please consider using code GOONS at gamersubs.gg to get 10% off at checkout. It's code GOONS. And yeah, so I'll keep you guys here just a little bit longer. Okay, I'm gonna end it now. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in Part 4. So, bye everyone.